the name of our loving and liberating and life-giving God, amen. If you're wondering what's happening up here, it's that you can't really hear much of the service from back there, and so we just don't want anyone to miss out on the brilliant oratorical. So get your notebooks out. All right. Well, it's good morning. Good morning. It's great to be with all of you on this rainy, rainy day. I know that were I not a priest, if I were something else, I might have made the decision to watch church in my pajamas with my coffee today. So I'm glad that all of you made the decision to be here together. Because it's good to be together in Christian community, is it not? See, I have some planted folks because they were here at 9. So Doug just said amen, so I saw a lot of nods and a lot of yeses, but let's make like our Baptist brothers and sisters. It's good to be in Christian community, is it not? Amen. The answer is amen. Yeah. Love lifelong Episcopalians. Okay. In all seriousness, though, this is one of my favorite Sundays of our lectionary cycle, the Good Shepherd Sunday, because it's all about this metaphor that we hear, Jesus being the Good Shepherd, the Lord is my shepherd. Our collect of the day reflects that. And it's one of the many parts of John where Jesus uses these metaphors to try to explain just who he is. So, I am the vine, you are the branches. I am the bread of life, right? I am the gate for the sheep. Anytime we hear these readings on a Sunday morning, I'm taken back to the summer between my junior and senior year of high school. So at my church in suburban Maryland, the associate priest had a family ranch in South Dakota up on Reynolds Prairie, which is one of the largest prairies in the Black Hills. And if you've never been there, it's this absolutely beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And so she would run summer programs at her ranch every summer, so she was with us from sort of Labor Day to Memorial Day at my church in Maryland, and then she would go to South Dakota for the summer. So the summer between my junior and senior year of high school, she invited me to come and be one of the counselors for a camp that she ran called Grady's program. Grady is an acronym that stands for Girls Responding Assertively to Defining Years. And throughout my life, I've wished that maybe they had a camp like that for adults, because we who live in the real adult world, who recognize the ups and downs of life, like what we hear in Psalm 23, we know that all of our years are defining years. Amen. Amen. Particularly, we know that we can't tell what is really going to happen in any particular year. At the beginning of the year, we don't know whether it's going to be one of those years that sort of defines us a little bit more, or whether it's going to be a pretty easy road. One of the things that I love about Psalm 23 is that it speaks to that truth of life. I used to think that Psalm 23 was only a psalm that was really worth reading at a funeral, and that's probably when you've heard it the most, outside of these Sundays when we come upon it in our lectionary cycle. But Psalm 23 is a psalm for each and every day of life. Psalm 23 acknowledges that there are highs and lows. Psalm 23 acknowledges that there are curveballs, things that come out of left field that we couldn't even imagine, and I know I just combined two baseball analogies, but Psalm 23, in addition to our reading from 1 Peter, and then what we hear in John's Gospel, becomes a pretty compelling faith statement for us this morning. Because Jesus acknowledges that there have been other people who have said that they were the ones who were the gatekeepers. Jesus acknowledges that even in real time, there may be others who say, "No, I am the gate." But Jesus is the gate. And Peter acknowledges that if we are to follow the Good Shepherd, if we are to listen to the voice of God, if we are to truly follow the path of the Lord, then sometimes we might endure pain or suffer unjustly. If you endure when you do right and suffer for it, you have God's approval. So that summer that I was a counselor at that camp in South Dakota, I had a situation that I was not prepared for. That was one of those curveball moments, and I wish I had had this set of readings to guide me and comfort me. There were several small groups of girls, and then each of those groups had a counselor assigned to them. And one of the young women in my group had broken the community covenant, not once or twice, but actually 3 times. And we had to make the right but very hard decision to send her home. We had to call her parents and have them drive from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is the furthest east side of the state, to have them drive all the way across the state to come pick her up in the Black Hills. And the other girls were upset at this decision. The other girls didn't necessarily understand, as even I as an older teenager and certainly as the adults did, the gravity of what happens when you have someone who isn't willing to live by the community covenant, right? That you have to hold them accountable in love, but sometimes that means making hard decisions. Doing what our reading from 1 Peter speaks to, that truth of enduring the suffering that comes from doing right, that comes from listening to the voice of the shepherd, that comes from following the path that voice leads us down. And so it had been a really emotional day and a really emotional evening, and after dinner, I decided that I was going to take some time out. Because when life throws us curveballs, sometimes it's good to just step aside, right? To take a moment and catch our breath, to make sure that we can just breathe and really take in whatever situation is going on. So I decided to take a walk outside onto the prairie. So Borderlands Ranch is in a valley between these 2 ridges, like I said, up on this really high prairie in the Black Hills. And in the evenings, one of the things we really enjoyed doing was sitting outside on the deck, listening to the calls of the coyotes across the ridges. Sometimes if we were really lucky, while we were out there, we would hear the coyotes and we would see the northern lights really, really far on the distant northern horizon. It was this incredibly beautiful, sort of spiritual place of Sabbath. And that's what I needed that night. So I thought that what I would do would be to walk down the path that went along the stream to the back 50 acres of the ranch. And I was going to find this big rock that's right next to the stream, and I was going to just sit on it for a few minutes and talk to God, kind of dwell in that idea that we had made the right decision to send this girl home, but that it was going to be hard for the community. Well, being the city slicker that I am, or was at that point in time, certainly, I got about halfway down the path towards the rock, and all of a sudden I realized how alone I was, except for, I heard that, except for the coyotes. So imagine there's one me on this path, and there's a billion coyotes up on the ridges. Probably weren't really a billion, there were probably like 2, but it felt like a lot. And it was a little bit scary, and so I made the best decision I could, which in hindsight was probably not the best decision. Instead of running back to the lodge, I continued on the path to try to just find this rock. This rock is like a boulder, and so I was convinced that if I just got up on this rock, the coyotes would settle down, and then I could have my minute with God, and eventually I would get back to the lodge in one piece. So I ran down the path, and I scurried up onto this rock, and just as I sat down, I heard these footsteps behind me, and I thought, I am going to die. I thought the coyotes were going to eat me. Little did I know that actually coyotes don't really eat people, but nonetheless, I was convinced that the coyotes were behind me, so I turned around, but instead of seeing coyotes, I saw a huge Great Pyrenees dog. Right? We can have the yeah, because there were no coyotes. Gandalf, the Great Pyrenees, was the ranch dog, and his job was to keep all of us safe when he wasn't trying to eat the chickens. The chickens were not safe, but we were. And what I realized was that Gandalf had been following me the whole time. That in the beginning of that walk, when I was feeling good and confident, when I was looking forward just to some time and space away, Gandalf was there. And when I was scared and thought that it was just me with the coyotes, I wasn't actually alone. And so Gandalf had followed me all the way to that rock. And I think that the coyotes weren't actually, at the end of the day, making any kind of noises that would have actually been about me, but that they were reacting to Gandalf's presence. That the coyotes were howling because they were the ones that were afraid of this giant dog. That's kind of how it is with God in our lives. We don't always know that God is there behind us, or beside us, or in front of us, but God is. The people and things in this world that don't understand God's purposes don't react well to us following the voice of God in our lives, to us following the path that the shepherd would lead us down. And when that reaction is negative, it can feel like we are all alone, like we are the ones who have done the wrong thing. But the good news is that we are not alone, and that God has always got us. Once I saw Gandalf being the creature that was behind me rather than the coyotes, I flung open my arms like a 17-year-old or 7-year-old might do in the presence of some great, calming, gentle beast. And I just flung my arms around him. And I held on tight. He came up onto the rock with me, and we snuggled for a few minutes. In hindsight, I'm pretty sure that he could feel how fast my heart was beating. And he snuggled me and held me close until I was calm again. So I was able to look up at the stars and to talk to God about how hard it was to know that we had made the right decision to send this girl home, but that it was not an easy path to follow. And when I was done with that moment, or those moments, Gandalf and I walked back to the lodge, where we were met again with community that, even though troubled, did not break. We were met again with community that at its deep core was about love and about care and about covenant with one another and relationship through all those ups and downs, through all the curveballs that life might throw us during that week in intentional community. The good news, friends, is that all of those things that were true for me in that space in South Dakota many, many years ago are true for us as well. They are true for this faith community. They are true for the communities that you are a part of. That when the going gets tough, when the curveballs seem to continue to come, God calls us by name. God leads us together down a path, and God is always with us. God is indeed that good shepherd that opens the gate for us when we return to the fold. God is our good shepherd, and so even though it feels like we lack, we will not want. God is our good shepherd, and so even when we feel like the path is only made of stones, we find green pastures and still waters. God restores our souls and leads us in his paths because he loves us and has given us that work to do. Yes, even sometimes it feels like we are walking in a valley full of death. But even in those moments, we do not fear because we know that God is with us. That God is with us and comforts us and holds us close. God prepares a feast for us over and over again, prepares a feast for those who follow and listen to his voice. God anoints us with oil, and in God's presence, there is abundant life. Even when life has thrown us a curveball, may we continue to believe that goodness and mercy indeed follow us each and every day of our lives, and that at the last we will dwell in God's house forever. Amen.
Amen.